Oftentimes, we think of homelessness as just being without a home. It might look like sleeping in a tent like this one on the Rideau River in Ottawa, or sleeping in a shelter like the Shepherds of Good Hope. But that's not always the case. The experience of homelessness differs greatly depending on the person, from where they sleep to the challenges they face.
Homelessness is this experience of being disconnected from so many of those different pieces of our lives. Having somebody stay in a house is, 20% of the work. The rest of the work is how can this person plug back in and connect to their community, to feel involved and engaged.
So homelessness is a widespread issue across Canada and the world, but it's hard to know the extent. Not only is there a disconnect in being homeless, there may also be a disconnect between how we collect data about homelessness and the reality. So how do we actually get the numbers? You may have heard of what's called a point-in-time count, or the PIT count. It's used all across the world, but in Canada, it's a nationally coordinated effort. There are two main parts: enumeration, or the count, which is coming up with a number of homeless people in a given community. And then there's the survey, which is asking homeless people a standardized set of questions. Questions like, how old are you? Or how did you become homeless? PIT counts in Canada happen every 3 years. The last one happened in late 2024, where 87 communities from across the country participated. While no place is required to participate in the count, according to the OECD, federal funding for homeless initiatives is usually tied up in a place's participation. Since the PIT count is nationally coordinated, there are a few core standards that every community has to follow. For example, the count has to be done on a single night in October or November. The PIT count is a huge logistical undertaking, and there are many factors that contribute to its success. In Ottawa and in many other places, they take a community-centered approach.
It's a very collaborative effort. There's no way the city could have done it by themselves. The City of Ottawa has a lot of community partners. We had 141 locations and 75 different community agencies that participated in the point-in-time count. So we had a core team with individuals representing our veteran community, the judicial systems, youth, Aboriginal and Indigenous, as well as new immigrants to the city.
Outreach staff literally go out and tally the number of homeless people living unsheltered or those in encampments. They combine this with the data they already collect from transitional housing and shelters. The survey portion is done over a wider period. In Ottawa's 2024 count, it took place over 5 days. Participants were asked a set of 29 questions over 10 or so minutes. They were allowed to skip any question they wanted, and at the end, they got a $10 gift card. But how do we actually use all this data? It actually helps with a ton of different social services.
Every social service serving agency in the city is connected to these results one way or another. You've got everything from the food banks will know how many people are unsheltered, and in the shelter system, you'll have our community health and resource centers, even the hospitals. They're all driven by the number of individuals requiring supports and services.
When it comes to Ottawa specifically, the PIT count shows us an over 13% increase in those experiencing homelessness from 2021 to 2024. That's more than 300 people. The survey shows us that there's been an uptick in homeless newcomers as well as racialized men from the ages of 25 to 49. Now that we know what numbers the count collects, we can take a closer look into what's missing.
It doesn't account for overall annual pictures. As it's called the point-in-time count, it is just a snapshot. So what our count would show that night of October 23rd may be different 2 months later.
Since this snapshot is so brief, the term hidden homelessness is used to describe those who aren't touching the system. For example, someone couch surfing or staying in an abandoned building or even being trafficked are homeless in a way that the count just can't pick up on. The survey also doesn't ask any location-specific questions. This lack of geographic data is another way that communities lack a full picture of homelessness. In fact, studies show that rural homelessness is much harder to quantify using the PIT count. There's also the social aspect of the count. where experts say the surveys themselves can be quite invasive, but there are some ways the count could be improved.
Because every time we ask a person questions about their personal life, they're often asked to reshare their trauma. Every intake is a new, moment where you're often explaining a traumatic story. And do we need to do that? And do we need to ask more and more intense questions? And I would say at times invasive. I really question that. And, I have colleagues who have lived experience of homelessness, and that's a big conversation that we're having.
So now that we've learned about what the PIC count is, how we collect the data, what it's used for, and some of the gaps, we can take a step back and look at the bigger picture. It's great to have all this data on homelessness, but it's going to take more than just numbers and statistics to end it.
The thing I always say, it's cheaper to end it than to manage it. And that's something that we often don't factor into it, but it's just something people get stuck and they don't realize this is such a solvable thing, but we have to think about doing it at a system level and not just piecemeal getting somebody into housing. It's a bigger thing than that, but we can do it with that collective work together.